ساقی بیا، ساقی بیا، ساقی بیا که یاز رخ پرده برگرفت. A poem by Hafez, the Persian mystical poet. You who pours the divine wine of oneness, come. The beloved has pulled the veil from love's face. The hearts of all mystics are set ablaze. The candle's bowed wick is lit again, and the one struck down by age is young again. Love arrived, and the judge departed. Love was so kind, the enemy dissolved, and animosity fled. Sari bia, sari bia, sari bia, ke yaz rukh parde bagere. Sari bia, sari bia, sari bia, ke yaz rukh parde bagere. Kar چراغ خلوتیم باز جا گرفت. کار چراغ خلوتیم باز جا گرفت. ساقی بیا، ساقی بیا، ساقی بیا که یاز رخ پرده برگرفت. آن شمع سر گرفته دگر چهره برفروخت. و این پیر سال خورده جوانی ز سر گرفت.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was beautiful. And welcome. Welcome to United Palace of Spiritual Arts. I'm Reverend Dr. Jose Miguel Roman, the spiritual counsel here and one of the hosts of Open Heart Conversations. Open Heart Conversations, where we come together as community once a month to explore one of the enduring spiritual or religious traditions that continue to inspire the minds of men and women and children and communities throughout the world. And today we have the pleasure of exploring what is in fact a very ancient tradition, a tradition that's said to be between 3,000 and 4,000 years old, Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is one of the world's oldest religions. There are said to be today about 200,000 followers of this ancient faith, many of them living in India or Iran. The most important text of the religion are those of the Avesta, which includes the writings of the prophet Zoroaster, also known as Zarathustra, the religion's major spiritual teacher. One of the world's first monotheistic faiths, Zoroastrianism, is said by some scholars, to be defined by a dualistic cosmology of good and evil. That is a somewhat interesting idea that we will be exploring, whose truth we'll be exploring together. It also has a theology that predicts the ultimate victory of good over evil. Zoroastrians worship a deity of light and goodness and wisdom, Ahura Mazda. The contrasting force to Ahura Mazda is drudge, falsehood or deceit, controlled by Angra Mainyu. Did I pronounce that properly?
Angra Mainyu.
Angra Mainyu. Angra is where the word
Anger comes from.
excellent. In Zoroastrianism, the primary purpose in life is to be among those who renew the world, those who make the world progress towards perfection. Zoroastrianism was among the world's first religions to teach ideas such as judgment after death, heaven and hell, and free will. Religious scholars agree that Zoroastrianism may have influenced a host of other religions and spiritualities, such as Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. Now, we have an extraordinary teacher with us today, and to hear a little bit about her is my wonderful co-host, Reverend Arda Itez.
Thank you. Let me begin by saying Adam, Hala, Michael, who left the stage. Where are you? There you are. Thank you, guys. That was absolutely extraordinary.
That
really
was
beautiful.
Beautiful.
So thank you. Our guest is Ferzin Patel, MA. She's a psychotherapist in New York and serves as a Zoroastrian community leader and trustee of the Dar-E-Mehr Zoroastrian Temple in Pomona, New York. Ferzin is an avid learner of comparative religions and began her quest to learn about different religious doctrine and beliefs while in college. Ferzin engages with other community leaders through the Interfaith Center of New York and serves as a guide and educator for school-age and college students from Harvard University, Ramapo College, and Bard College, who come to Dar-E-Mehr Zoroastrian Center to learn about the religion, history, and culture. She provides visitors of the community center with a looking glass of how Zoroastrians pray and conduct religious services and practices. Her passion is to educate others about Zoroastrianism, obviously. She has served on the board of the Zoroastrian Association of Greater New York for 6 years, served as co-chair of the 2012 North American Zoroastrian Congress, and is a frequent speaker on Zoroastrian identity in the contemporary world. Ferzin currently facilitates a group for intermarried Zoroastrian families and serves as a mentor for intermarried couples in her community. In 2006, she worked with colleges to launch the still thriving Zoroastrian Intermarried Group, which helps couples and families acclimate to Zoroastrian culture and religious beliefs and practices. In 2017, West Point Military Academy's Cadet Interfaith Center, which I didn't even know existed, invited her to speak to cadets to familiarize them with the Zoroastrian religion and community in the event they deploy to the Middle East region. Ferzin holds a master's degree in clinical and developmental psychology from Columbia University and spent 15 years working in the field of autism and developmental disabilities, including 9 years as a clinical supervisor and administrator at an outpatient medical and mental health clinic in Manhattan, serving developmentally disabled New Yorkers. Her current practice focuses on the advocacy of mindfulness and conscious parenting, and the ways we can connect with our children and bridge the world to a more conscious existence. So please join me in welcoming Ferzin Patel.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Reverend Arda and Dr. Jose. I appreciate your invitation today, and I look forward to speaking to you and educating everyone. Thank you all for coming and being here today on this beautiful spring Sunday that we're having, and I look forward to engaging with you and sharing a little bit about our religion with you today. Thank you.
So let's jump right in. Who are the Zoroastrians?
So that's a big loaded question. The Zoroastrians come from an ancestry which hails from Iran originally, but it stretched all the way from the boundaries of China in the Penjikent Mountains all the way to the west to Turkey and Greece. And it really flourished in the Sasanian and the Achaemenian time. And it was the original Persian official religion of the Persian Empire. And it was not only thought of as the first monotheistic religion, but it posed such an influence on other religions itself. Mm-hmm. It was the first religion to really profess the idea of heaven and hell, good and light, darkness, and really absorb the notion that the ecology and living amongst nature was essential to having a bountiful life that reaches ultimately to heaven's gates, or what we would call. So the Zoroastrians have evolved over many, many centuries. Currently, there's about 200,000 in the world today. They've migrated to different places. Primarily, there are about 25,000 in Iran. The other countries that have Zoroastrians are in India, and they are known now as the Parsis. These Parsis have immigrated out of persecution from the Arab invasion, and they came to India to settle in hopes that they could continue their practice of their religion.
Why do you think there is such a small number? 200,000 is quite small. And I know earlier we had discussed that there is a resurgence in the religion, but why do you think the numbers have dwindled so much?
So primarily through proselytization. You know, that when Zoroaster started prophesizing and going throughout and trying to get people to understand his message, it was an open religion. Anyone could join. It was a matter of free choice, which is one of the tenets of what he was trying to convey, that each person, man or woman, has the choice to come and understand what he was speaking about. Over this time and centuries, through also different ideas of religious practice, like the Arab invasion, the small groups that needed to convert were converted, otherwise they were sentenced to death. And even to this day, in that current region, there is a threat that you have to practice the religion in a quiet way. And so there are people that are still, you know, in Iran that do not wear the typical sadra and kasti, which are the garments that are worn underneath our clothing, as a identity to being a Zoroastrian. They have to do it in hiding. So actually, when you go into a fire temple, everybody normally wears the shirt and the thread on an everyday basis. However, in Iran, they hang the sadra and the kasti outside the temple, because once you leave the temple, you don't want to be known as having the identity of a Zoroastrian, because it could be a threat to your life.
So who was Zarathustra?
So Zarathustra was our prophet, and it is said that it started about 3,000 years ago. He was born close to the Aral Sea, up near Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. He was the son of a herdsman, and he himself belonged to the priestly class. At that time, there were many, many different pagan religions happening, and so it was very tribal in its nature, and so he was part of that, and he sought out a different message. He knew something was not right. It did not sit right with him, that there was destruction and disease and deployment of a message that wasn't clear to him. So at the age of 30, he went out and he looked for something more meaningful. He left home, actually at the age of 22, and went for 10 years in search of something more meaningful. And it was found high up on a mountain. He went in that region. And as he was bathing in the water, some essence of what we called an Amisha spenta. An Amisha spenta is one of 6 natural, bountiful essences of what Ahura Mazda calls the requirements that each one of us has that we embody. And these Amisha spentas comprise themselves of Asha, which is righteousness, devotion, love. So the Amisha spenta of wisdom came to him, and they're almost looked at like archangels, if you will. And this is something that Ahura Mazda, which is our definition of God, is what we call God. Ahura Mazda means great Lord of wisdom. And so the Amisha spenta came to Zarathustra and brought him to Ahura Mazda, and he received God's message of being a righteous person, that the true path to happiness and goodness is through the path of righteousness. And so God bestows all this knowledge onto him, and he goes back and he tries to invoke his people to follow in this path. And it was very difficult because of all the different religions that taking place and the paganism at that time. It wasn't until King Vishtaspa, who was the ruler at that time, endorsed Zarathustra's message. And apparently he had gone there to heal his horse. And the king had said, "Tell me more and give me some enlightenment." And that, through his message, was something that the king could relate to. And so started Zoroastrianism and the major thought within the Persian Empire.
It became the state religion at one point.
Yes. So as time went, the influence that Zoroastrianism had was because, the priests at that time were very well versed, not only in religious thought, but also in medicine, politics, social issues. Sometimes they would be the mediators, like lawyers, like that we have. So they were very influential on the king and how the workings of the palace and the kingdom was going to be run. So these priests had tremendous influence on them.
So it's not unusual that when we were talking about this earlier, the 3 kings were actually...
They were actually magi, and they were actually priests. They came from a priestly class. They were not kings, actually, but priests, and the word magic comes from magi. And the magi had an envision that there would be a Messiah, a new Messiah. And so they did go to Bethlehem to seek out of curiosity as to what this could be. and they brought frankincense and myrrh, which is actually what Zoroastrians practice in putting in their fire. We light our fire with 6 pieces of frankincense and myrrh, which is we call sukar and loban. And these essences are sweet wood, the sweetest part of the wood that burns. And so it convenes and has a connection with God.
It's extraordinary to see that connection with Zoroastrianism into Christianity. And what other practices, what other religions and spiritualities do you see the influence and the connection to Zoroastrianism?
So, being someone who is very interested in learning about comparative religions myself, I see it within Buddhism, the essence of time and how time flows in and out. And I also see it in Islam. And, I think there's some universal elements that speak truth to every religion. And these truths, there's a collective consciousness that we all hold. And this consciousness comes into light when we each bring about a true definition of what Ashy, in which is the tenet of Zoroastrianism, which is righteousness, in finding the truth, not only just like the truth that we see as reality in the physical form, but also in the spiritual form, in the ethical form, in the moral form. And that is what each Zoroastrian aspires to, is to reach that.
Speak a little bit to this idea that Zoroastrianism is extremely dualistic, and that there is Ahura Mazda, but there's also, if you will, an evil force that is essentially almost comparable, and that therefore there's almost this yin-yang approach to spirituality. How true is that, or how much is that a misunderstanding?
So a lot of time, people associate Zoroastrianism with being a monotheistic religion, but some have called it dualistic in its approach from a cosmic point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So in the ideology of Zarathustra's teachings, he teaches that Ahura Mazda is the only creator of good. Ahura Mazda does not create evil. Evil is a sense, a part of every single one of us sitting here today. The word angra meniyu means the angry mind, okay, or thought. So each one of us brings to it from our own lack or a space of fear. So anger comes about from the essence of not having good. Okay, so it's a depletion of good. It doesn't exist in its full form in terms of equating. So you can look at it as an abacus. So we look at the good, 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 but then I had a really bad thought about that. So, okay, take one notch down. That doesn't mean that evil exists. It means that there's a frustration of penetrating through the good. So many times philosophers and theologians will talk about Zoroastrianism as a dualistic religion.
You don't see it that way.
I don't see it that way, no. And I think most practicing Zoroastrians tend to have a very optimistic outlook. And so we don't really focus on the essential evil. I don't even think, essentially look at it from a standpoint of focus. The focus is always on the good, on the benevolence.
So the universe is created by a totally benevolent, good, and perfect God. Hence, the universe is itself totally benevolent, good, and perfect. Except that in that universe, there is this at times, if you will, a space empty of anything. And it is within that space where evil can arise.
Correct. So there comes a space of lack when we have fears, when we attach, and it comes into a physical form, and it comes into a spiritual form. So let me give you an example. When we think of these tsunamis and these hurricanes and these people say, oh, it's God, he's reprimanding all of us humans. But from a Zoroastrian's point of view, God is benevolent. These things happen because it's nature. It comes in its natural form. We, as humans, look at it from a negative point of view because out of fear. We fear what will happen to us, that world will end. But these natural elements have to happen. From a Zoroastrian point of view, it's meant to happen, it will happen. How we look at it is very important.
Is Ahura Mazda God a person?
It's an entity. It's an entity. So there is reflective interpretation of it being he. I think we, in nature, just automatically go to conditioning and call it he. But it is neither man nor woman. It has no gender. It has no form. It's the wise Lord. So it's wisdom. It comes from a world of wisdom.
What are the core tenets and beliefs?
Sure. So Zoroastrian belief system came from the Amishaspentas, which I spoke about earlier. These are the essence of all humanity, all nature, all creation. And God created these entities. They are represented in the physical and in the spiritual again. I'll give you an example. God created the sky, water, fire, humans, animals, plants. And so those Amishaspentas are reflective of also having spiritual characteristics. They represent devotion, love, wisdom, truth, and balance and justice. And so these each combine together and create what we have as a trifecta. So you may see like the 10 Commandments. I call the trifecta, which are Humata, Hukta, and Huvareshta. This is the Avestan language of the ancient Persians. And that means good thoughts lead to good words, which lead to good deeds. And every human is destined to follow this in order to seek a final immortality in heaven.
So it's sort of interesting because in your biography it talked about your interest and devotion really to mindfulness. And you just said something that really is deeply connected to that idea. Namely, you are committed to the cultivation of your mind, right? Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Speak a little bit to that.
Sure. So when anybody goes through a situation, the first reaction is usually a physical reaction, correct?
Oh, yeah.
When someone triggers you, you're like, ugh, you get it all in your stomach.
Yeah, speak to my sister. She can tell you every time she deals with me.
So we must pause and reflect upon this. And when we act with thought, we can leave elements of ourselves to connect back to that. And it's very important for us to realign ourselves back to a way of processing it through our minds, but also connecting it to our hearts. So we think the thoughts, we process the thoughts to create words that will help us lead to benevolent good deeds. And so in terms of mindfulness, a lot of times we are constantly rushed. We're very reactive to anything that is going on around us. Why are we all in this universe so stressed out these days? Because there's no time. There's no time for pause.
Absolutely.
And what meditation does, or mindfulness does, is allow us the moment to reflect, which is really about thought and connecting to that thought. And once we connect to those thoughts, we can process and reflect with somebody to talk about it, to reflect through a good word. And that good word ultimately leads us to trying to do a good deed.
Are there specific practices within the tradition to help cultivate this ideology, or is it something that you're kind of taught as a child? Or is it something, I know that I thought this was really interesting, that there's no, there's no traditional service per se, a weekly service. It's more of a community type gathering. So speak to that a little bit.
So as we're growing up in a Zoroastrian home, we are taught, these three words. I mean, every Zoroastrian knows the trifecta of our practice. And so as a child growing up, you were eventually brought into the fold with an initiation ceremony called the Nowruz, which means new member. And if I can show you a little bit about what it entails. So the Nowruz ceremony is a very important time for any Zoroastrian to enter into. Every boy or girl wears one of these for the rest of their life. It's removed upon shower and taking a bath, and then you put it back on. Everybody has a few of these sitting in their drawers, and it represents almost like a shield for a warrior to conquer evil or angrameniu within themselves and within the physical world as well. And how it's worn is with this thread called the trustee. And the trustee is handmade. It's made out of lamb's wool. Lamb because it is very innocent, and it represents the herding of what Zoroaster was when he was growing up. And so this is wound 72 times, and this is the 72 chapters from the Avestan texts. And it is wound 3 times to represent good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And this ancient practice of making the trustee is actually being handed down now. We have an organization that works with the younger generation to teach them how to make the trustees, because it is a dying trade. Not everyone wants to engage in it. And so we wrap the trustee around the sadra 4 times, and the knot is in the middle. The knot is to represent the balance and holding balance. And this is done with the idea that you are identified as a Zoroastrian, and that you represent good, and you are a warrior and co-worker of Ahura Mazda. In God's terms, in Zoroastrianism, we don't look at man as somebody who is a slave to God, but rather a co-worker or co-helper of spreading goodness in the world.
When you hear a Muslim speak of Allah, a Christian speak of the Trinity, a Jew speak of Elohim, is to you those different names of Ahura Mazda? Is there one God, many names?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. And the God of Ahura Mazda is representative through wisdom, right? And through these Amishaspentas, his essence, through devotion and love and fairness, and representative of nature as well.
You refer to the temples as fire temples, correct?
Yes.
There is a remarkable symbolic meaning of fire to Zoroastrians. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. Fire is the quintessential symbol of Zoroastrianism. It is the one element that provides warmth. It provides a vision of seeing light and truth. And we don't worship In fact, some people say we are fire worshippers, but we're not. It's like a Christians praying to the cross. Right. So it's a symbol. It's a path to conveying with Ahura Mazda. And so fire is reverence to God and to bring out light and understanding of his eternal message.
That's powerful. What is it in this faith that you love the most?
For me, I think it's the simplicity. And it's the connection to three basic universal ideas. And that it's a reflective religion. It does not have a prescriptive idea. There are rituals which are contained in the Holy Scriptures of the Vendidad. The Vendidad is part of the Avestan Book of Prayers, as are the Gathas. The Gathas are the 17 psalms or hymns that Zoroaster had created through prose and poems. And those have been written down into those 17 chapters or verses. And we call them, they're very short, and we call them has or hayetis. And they're beautiful in their essence because they're so pure. There's nothing to misinterpret. And I'd like to read one for you, if you don't mind. It's one of the most universal, but yet it speaks volumes in terms of meaning. So the message of Zarathustra is summarized in the following passage from the Gatha. Clear is all to the man of wisdom as to the man who carefully thinks. He who upholds truth with all the might of his power. He who upholds truth to the utmost in his word and deed. And he, indeed, is thy most valued helper, O Ahura Mazda. So, you see, there's a creation of truth that is so essential, but yet it's not to be contained only within the self. It is to give back to the world. It's to supplement it inside what is so important for the universe, for all of us. It's not just compounded within our own tribal unity.
He was very anti-tribalism, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Yes. Which is why he got in trouble for so many years. No one wanted to buy into this idea. And this is why also it was so vast across the Persian Empire. And even in today's society, we have a group of Kurds up in northern Iran who are interested in coming back to their indigenous religion, as well as Iranians who would like to come back and reconvene with it, because it is where their ancestry is from and their ideology.
So there are quite a few well-known Zoroastrians out there. This is like the fun part because I get such a kick out of this. Cyrus the Great.
Cyrus the Great.
Cyrus the Great was a Zoroastrian. Zubin Mehta was a Zoroastrian. And I feel like I might have known that because I was a violin player for 18 years. So I feel like I knew that and I just forgot. And my favorite, Freddie Mercury. Who said it? You said it. Freddie Mercury was a Zoroastrian. Who am I forgetting? Is there anyone else that I'm forgetting?
So many. No, those are the big ones.
Yeah.
Yes, Freddie Mercury, which has been, my phone has been bouncing because so many people want to know about Zoroastrianism now, and so I get calls all the time.
Well, he had said that his faith was played a big role in his life. Yes. And it was really interesting because most of us, for the most part, how many of you had ever even heard of Zoroastrianism prior to Freddie Mercury? Prior to Freddie Mercury. Okay, that's impressive, 3 of you. Mm-hmm. But, honestly, it's very, very interesting It's very interesting to see the influence that it has in people's lives.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the relevance of who they are too, because Freddie Mercury didn't, his identity was his Zoroastrian roots. He came actually from a priestly family, and
Was there a caste system in
India there was a caste
I know in India,
system.
but in the Zoroastrian religion was it?
No,
No.
it didn't matter whether you were rich or poor. The faith speaks to all members of its class.
What about women? The role of women in Zoroastrianism.
This is another element of the religion that I admire, because from the Gathas, where Zoroaster speaks, there is a quality of women, that it does not, it's man and woman. There is reference in those words in the Avestan texts that there is equality. Women, even now today, assist the priests in the fire temple. Previously, it was probably a kind of a dying position because of social conditions. When we were in India, because it follows more of a patriarchal lineage, that element probably died down because it wasn't considered an appropriate position. However, there's a resurgence, and we see a lot of women priests helping. They're more of assistants in the form of helping with the fire, maintaining the fire. They are in the inner sanctum, and it's wonderful to see that.
So you do have priests.
Yes, we have 3 different kinds of priests. We have the high priest, who is not only a priest for theology, but they learn also about history and culture and the elements of the language that are imposed. So we have high priests, we have what are called, when they are called dasturs, and then we have ervads, who are the assistants to the priests. And then we also have the matabs, who are learning the elements of becoming a priest.
So women can attain the highest level of priesthood.
They could. I've never seen it, but
It can happen. It's not
happen.
forbidden or...
No. Women
So
have
I
a
imagine
role.
there will be Zoroastrian female priests in the future, given that there is a resurgence in the religion, and I think that's wonderful.
It's very interesting because in the Amishaspentas, which are the essence I spoke about of Zoroastrianism, 3 of the Amishas are females. They have female characteristics, especially the one of love and water, Aban, and so they have titles and names, and so it's an equal parting of 3 essence and spirits, and of female and male.
Balance.
Balance.
Absolutely. Now, I know that we are in the midst of a holiday. Is that correct? Or is the holidays just ending? So speak to some of the holidays that you celebrate and what this one in particular is.
Sure. So we are currently coming off of what we call Nowruz, and Nowruz means new day. It is the it's a celebration of the virile equinox, where light is coming back and overpowering darkness. And we celebrate that traditionally on the first day of spring, which is either March 20th or March 21st. And this is also known as the Persian New Year. However, it was originated by Zarathustra to honor wisdom and to give light to bringing truth. And so this has been carried on not only in Iran, but we see elements of it throughout that region, through Central Asia and in Turkey and Azerbaijan and all different other places of worship, because they see the element of the meaning so powerful. And it speaks to, again, back to nature. It talks about, the bringing of new beginnings. And so I want to just maybe show you a little elements of the
Yeah, please
Hafshin
do.
table. This
Please
is
do.
what we call a Hafshin table.
How do you pronounce that?
Hafshin,
Hafshin.
H-A-F-T.
Hafshin.
Yeah. Now, sin means 7, okay? And so these are 7 elements that we have that represent some of the Amishaspantas as well. So and they all begin with the letter S. So sin is 7, Haft is 7, and then sin is S. So it's 7 S's. So we start with Sinjad, which is the olive, dried olive, it's what we call Russian olives.
That's this.
This is here. Mm-hmm.
Here?
Yeah, Sanjad. And then we have Somana, and that's the sumac berries, and that represents sunrise with its red color. Then we have Sumanu, which is a sweet pudding from wheat germ, and that represents affluence. And then we have Sirke, and that is vinegar, and that represents age, wisdom, and patience.
Now, you would find something like an altar like this in the temple or in one's home or both?
Both. Actually, you would find it in any Persian's home, whether they were Zoroastrian or not. Most Iranians and people from that general area would have a Hafsin table at home. And so the purpose is also we typically open the windows, you clean your home, it's the time of renewal. So you would throw out anything old, you would dress in new clothes, you would clean your home, dust off all the carpets, and set up a beautiful Hafshin table. And the celebration goes on for 13 days. The night before the celebration, on the Wednesday before, we have what we call fire jumping. And so we jump over fire to bring in the good, like you're welcoming the good, and you throw away the bad. And you say, I want to welcome the good,
beautiful.
and we throw away, and we say something else when we jump, and we throw away the bad. And look at the past.
We're going to have to try that.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, it's
right.
very fun. I think you
Give
would
that a
enjoy
shot.
it.
Fire jumping, I like that.
And then we have sabze, which is wheat. It represents rebirth and nature. And then we have seer, which is garlic, which represents medicine and purification and disinfection. And the mirror is here for us to reflect on what we did for that past year and look at, the good, the bad, and really reflect on what we've achieved and maybe new goals. The candle is there to represent light and fire. We have decorated eggs for evolution and nature. We have the dried fruits to represent the harvest.
Tell us a little bit about this beautiful, because this is a sign we tend to see even
It's
in
similar
museums.
to this, what we're seeing here in the frame.
Right.
And correct, this is for those of you who can't.
This is called a Lamasu. And a Lamasu is a man's head, bird's wings, and a bull's body. And it represents nature in its full form, human, the birds and the animals, and it combines them together to protect each fire temple. So you'll see these at the entrance of all the fire temples, usually. And the Lamasu, actually, these are just replicas, but the original huge ones, which are about this big, they're actually in the British Museum. And
those are about 3,000 years old.
they're
right?
about...
the ones in the British Museum.
Yes.
Sorry.
And each fire temple, even if you go to Iran or India, you will see these on the outside of those fire temples. And they're part of the Achaemenian time that had tremendous influence in terms of being protectors and all-powerful. And they were seen as warding off evil. Yeah.
You also see a sign, usually this kind of a sign, this sign here.
Okay, we call that a farvahar or a fravashi, and it is essentially the essence of humanity. And
What is he pointing to? Which way you pointing?
This, it's like an
these
eagle,
two
isn't it?
pictures.
Oh, okay.
So, yes, it is an eagle. It has its influences actually in Egyptian and Armenian influences. So it didn't come about in the Zoroastrian time, but it came about later on during the Persian Empire. And it has a lot of influences. So there are 3 layers of wings, which represent the outward wings of good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And then you have the wings going down, which represent bad thoughts, bad words, and bad deeds. And it's said that, that they hold the ring is the ring of truth, which is constant and continuous. And the Fravashi is actually secular. So you'll see this also, again, in a lot of homes in Iran. It's representative universally there in that region. It's really a connection to humanity and to keep the thought of sharing and being bountiful with all mankind, not just within our own. And that's probably one of the most important tenets of Zoroastrianism, is to share. Wealth is looked upon as okay, as long as you're sharing it and doing it honestly with good intention. So it is accepted that you can make a lot of money, but help others too.
It's amazing because it seems like the idea of character and righteousness, the evolution of one's individual character and righteousness are absolutely central to this faith.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes, it's taught from an early age, and you come across, there's times in our lives where you have challenges, and it's always thought that you have to just look deep within. And that's not always easy sometimes, There's always poses those questions of, am I being true to myself? Am I being too righteous? So I think that when we're taught as children, we're taught as we are human too. We make mistakes. We're not taught as we have to be this perfect person all the time. It's about extending and using your good mind to make those choices. We have to suffer for any mistakes and bad choices. And Ahura Mazda has given us free will. He has given it to us. You have to use it. And that is the point of I think the most important point that Zarathustra makes, is that the mind has been given to us. Question, don't go to condition, question things. He got a lot of slack for it, when he questioned the tribal ideology. And so when he did that, he was the first one to question what's going on and went out in search of that until he was satisfied.
There's a sense in Zoroastrianism that everything is holy. It's not so much about the human being, but everything in life is holy. And this was something Albert Einstein had said, that mankind needs a cosmic religion. And that's really the feeling that you get from Zoroastrianism, that it's not just, it's not just about the human being. It's about nature. It's about the animals. It's about everything.
Preserving nature is one of the fundamental elements of our religion.
In fact, religious scholars refer to Zoroastrianism as the first ecological religion ever. And that I have read numerous times.
That is correct. Even within our ritual practices of purification, of even death, upon death, we give back to nature in our burial, where we go to the Tower of Silence, and we, rather than impurifying the earth, we don't bury, we give back to nature, and we actually have birds come down and take the body away.
That probably sounds controversial. A lot of people are probably just, kind of can't fathom that, but it's logical.
It's ecological, right?
Yeah.
It's a circle of life.
It's logical and ecological.
Right.
Yeah.
We actually, in our temple right now, it's so prevalent that we not take from the earth and use energy sources. So one of the first things that we did upon building our current temple in Pomona, New York, was to put solar on the building. That was very, very key. So we were self-sustained, that we were not using anything that we did not need to use. And even with creating the building, it was like everything was motion sensor, so that energy wasn't being used up. It was about being mindful of it and challenging each time that we needed to do something. It was almost like extra effort to do it. But you know what? In the end, it was about the tenet of what our goal was, which was to preserve nature, was to preserve and be mindful of not, destruction of it, protecting it.
Wonderful. So you're going to share something with us. We're going to get into the experiential portion. So why don't you tell us what it is that you're going to...
So first I'd like to introduce back the band, and they're going to first sing a song about spring for us. So let's welcome them back on stage.
Would like to sit down. Okay.
آمد زمستون شکفته بهارون گل سرخ خورشید در اومد و شب شد گریزون گل سرخ خورشید در اومد و شب شد گریزون
Beautiful. Thank you. So what I'd like to do now is share with you the prayers from our holy scriptures, which is the Avesta. The Avesta is composed in 4 different forms. The most holiest of form is the Gatha. Then you have what's called the Korda Avesta, which is the daily prayers. Prayers are similar to the faith of Islam, are spoken 5 times a day traditionally, before waking, after shower, at noon, in the evening before sundown, and then again in the evening before bedtime. Contemporarily, we typically, when we wake or after we shower, we typically remove the sadra and kasti, do our prayers, and then at night we do our prayers again. It's a reminder to reconnect not only to God, but also to within ourselves and speak of, did we seek truth today? Did we do good today? And during this ceremony of prayer, there are some elements of purification that we do before we engage in the prayer. So that would be to first wash your hands. When you go inside the Zoroastrian temple, you would wash your hands, typically. You'd also cover your head, because when you enter into the fire temple, you don't want hair, which is considered dead, right? Dead, the hair's dead and nails are dead. So we didn't want the hair to fall into the fire. And also removing your shoes, which is actually very similar to other cultures and Indo-Iranian practices of religious practice. So these things are the elements of going into a fire temple. Now in America, North America, we actually welcome people to come and visit our fire temples. Previously in many years ago, and even today in India and some parts of Pakistan, they do not allow outsiders into the fire temples. It is only reserved for people of Zoroastrian faith. And part of the reason for this is because these are consecrated fires. These are fires that have been burning for 3,000 years. They've been brought over from Iran, and these are the most holiest of fires. They come from 16 different elements of fire. So when these fires were brought over from India, from Iran to India, someone, not by boat, they can't mix water and fire together. They had to walk along the hills and bring it down south. The fire was brought to India after the exilation of all the Zoroastrians from Iran. And during that persecution, the Zoroastrians came over and the fire was brought. The fire is usually from nature, which would be a piece of fire from lightning, and then also from other tradesmen. So it would be a baker, a blacksmith, the fire from the body of a Brahmin, actually. And so these fires are finally mixed together, and they are prayed on for about 14,000 hours, so which is about 18 months. And those fires are contained in fire temples, which are similar to your cathedrals. Okay, so we have 3 kinds of fire temples. So those are called Atash Bairams. And those fires are the holiest and the most sacred. And they can only be brought in from the description I just talked about with the 16 fires. And so there are only 9 in the world. The oldest fire temple is in Yazd, Iran, and that still is lit to this day. It is tended to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, religiously, and never goes out, ever, ever. And so that's why it is so difficult to proselytize the religion, because you cannot really have holiest of fires within a vicinity if people are not committed to taking care of them, because they do need to be tended to 24
Well, there's one
hours a
now,
day.
just a brand new one in Texas, is that right?
So I am very proud to say that we have just last week started a second tier fire, which is in an Atash Adaran, which is the second tier, which would be like a church fire. And this is the first one in North America that is being tended to 24 hours a day by a group of very committed priests from 70 years old all the way down to 12 years old.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes. Yeah, and these people are very committed to doing this. And
now the responsibility is to keep this fire burning
Yes.
for a
forever.
millennia.
Forever.
Wow.
Yes, that is the goal. And so with the Atash Adaran, that's the second tier of fire temples. They're required to have 4 different types of fires that are brought about. And then what we have are called the Dar-E-Mehrs, which is the temple that I work at. And the Dar-E-Mehr stands for Doors of Peace. And those are quite significant. They have a fire temple inside, and those can be just lit by the priests as needed. It is still a holy fire. However, it is not tended to and can burn out on its own. So we allow the fire to burn out on its own. It also serves as a place of community. So it's almost like a community center where people would come and talk to one another, learn from each other, and like a group gathering place. And so that's the third, or like a chapel, if you will. So that is how the fires
Wonderful.
of Iran have gone and migrated to India.
It's interesting because we talked about there are no services in the say, if you will, the Christian sense, but there are activities that take place in the temples. Correct? What does a temple life look like? What are temples serve? To the extent that there's some activity, what does that activity look like?
So. Zarathustra's message from Ahura Mazda was that you pray from an individual point of view. So it's not communal in the sense on a daily basis. We do gather together for communal prayer during the seasonal holidays. So we have what are called gambars. And the gambars are, again, ones go back to the Amisha Spentas, which represent water, fire, sky, plants, and animals. It also represents the seasons and nature. And during these gambars, we have what are called jashan ceremonies. Jashan means it's the communal service where everyone gathers. Also during jashans, we also have them like when let's say I buy a new house and I want to clean out the old spirit and bring in some healthy, good spirit, because we don't know what, took place, right?
I just bought a new house and I went through a ceremony like that.
So similar to
I'm
saging.
totally into it. That's
right.
exactly
So you're
right.
cleansing the spirit of the
Absolutely,
house, right?
Yeah. Making it your space.
Right. Yeah. So then we have also jashans for remembrance of a loved one who's passed on their year anniversary. Those kinds of milestones are very, very important in the Zoroastrian faith. And we do get together where a priest will come to your home or they'll come to the temple, they'll light the fire, there'll be 2 priests sitting next to each other or a group of priests, depending. And during those ceremonies, it's a veneration to get blessings, but also to remember the dead and to remember the souls that have gone to immortality. And it's a communal, and we similarly set up a table like this to share the fruits and benefits that come with nature providing for us. And so in that respect, we do have both. It's not as often, but I think it's based on free will once again. It's free choice. And how you choose is, consequence to what you want to put into it.
So the prayer that you're about to share with us is is it one that would be publicly spoken, or is it something that you would at home on a daily basis?
So this is the first prayer. each person or child is taught this is the first prayer, but it's the most important prayer because it talks about Asha, and Asha being truth and righteousness. You're praying for Asha to help guide you to doing what's right for the sake of doing right. Not that you have to do it, not that someone told you to do it, not that you have ulterior motives to do it, but because it is the right thing to do for the right thing to do. So I'm going to just say it for you or explain it to you. To think a good thought, to speak a good word, to do a good deed, virtue is good, is the best thing, is the everlasting happiness that comes to him who virtuously does it for the sake of virtue, which is the best. It's simple, it's universal. It speaks volumes to what each one of us can just basically do.
It's magnificent.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was
Thank
absolutely
you.
wonderful. Thank you very, very, very much. And I think we're going to have the artist join us again.
I believe so.
Yeah, we're going to sing that final prayer that you just heard her speak.
Before you do that, there is something I'd like to do. I'm going to take and do something a little unexpected. Before we came together today, we had an opportunity to spend a little time downstairs in the dressing room. And we discovered something rather amazing. When I was in college, at the City College of New York, I had a professor by the name of K.D. Irani. Professor Irani was a philosopher of science who had worked at the Princeton Institute of Advanced Studies with Albert Einstein. I took a bunch of courses with him, including in ethics and even a course on the philosophy of quantum mechanics. He was one of my intellectual mentors and one of my intellectual inspirations. And I found out that he played a role like that in your life.
He was my inspiration for wanting to pursue this in my college life after I had many conversations with him and growing up with him as just a family friend of my parents. He inspired me so much to seek wisdom deeper into what and who I was and where I came from.
He was a Zoroastrian.
He was a Zoroastrian.
That was extraordinary, and I did not know that about him in college. And I would love for us to dedicate, if it's comfortable with the artist, this last song to the memory of this remarkable, remarkable man who has had such a wonderful, wonderful impact in both our lives.
Yes.
Thank you.
Friends, Ferzin has brought these wonderful pamphlets that can provide you more information about Zoroastrianism. I'm happy to give them to you. If our friends online that are watching, if they want more information about Zoroastrianism, where can they find it?
So the best resources maybe are to go to www.avesta.org, avesta.org, and also fezana.org, F-E-Z-A-N-A. It's the Federation of Zoroastrians in North America, and that provides a lot of links and information and what we're currently doing and what we've done in the past, and it provides a lot of resources. So I strongly encourage you, and I encourage you all locally, if you are here today, to come and see the beautiful fire temple that we have in Pomona, New York, just close by, about 30 minutes out of New York City.
Wonderful. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Sure.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. I think we're about to.
My question is the religion, when coming to North America, has it changed at all? Usually religions tend to modernize.
So has the religion changed as it came here to
Has
America?
it been westernized? Yeah.
So in terms of practice, I think that because the fire temples are such an element of communal worship and of a base, this is why we have started building these fire temples, or Dar-E-Mehrs, because they're so essential to a gathering spot. You know, when we first came to New York, we used to meet at the UN building. And then in 1970, we moved to New Rochelle, which was like a house. Someone, you know, it was a house, and it, you know, it had an upstairs, downstairs. But it still was not our temple. We didn't feel an affinity to pray the same way that we did. It wasn't until we built this new fire temple that people feel a genuine connection to the fire and to praying with the priests. And I think that the identity has increased tremendously because we now have these houses of worship. I don't want to put, you know, physical emphasis on having this, because we do need to do it on an individual basis. But it's very important because we are so few and far between. I don't know a lot of Zoroastrians in my social circles because we're so spread apart in North America. In India, you have communities that live together. We call them bags, and they're almost like you know, fenced-off areas and properties where only Zoroastrians or Parsis live in. And majority of people live in those areas, are very connected. They're either your cousin or you're related somehow to them because there's such a small community. But in North America, I see a change happening, because when you're in India, you take for granted what the meaning is behind some of the rituals, the meaning behind going back to the original ideology of Zarathustra. And so what I see in North America is that migration back to connecting with nature, to connecting with the elements, to connecting not so much with the ritualistic practice in its essence. There's a little shift, but I do see a strength in people wanting to practice, but practicing it in its original form of using the Ameshaspentas and communicating with nature.
We have a question right here. No, wait.
He's got a
my friend,
microphone coming for you.
Please forgive me. Thank you so much.
Just so our friends online can hear you as well.
You mentioned something about lightness and darkness. What is the connection, or is there a connection between Zoroastrianism and Manichaeism?
I don't know much about Manichaeism, so I don't know if I can answer that question to its fullest. Could you enlighten me a little bit?
Manichaeism, as I understand it, certainly not an expert, is based in some ways on a battle between light and dark. And again, it's sort of an ancient religion. I thought maybe there was some sort of connection between the two philosophies.
Yeah, that I'm not too sure about, but I will speak on light and darkness. So when creation in our faith began, there was the creation of the sky, okay? And through the sky and the sun, that is where existence first happened in the cosmos. And when we talk of Druj, or what are the negative essence of the world, those were imposed through darkness. And so we always come back to this battleground of trying to force, the Druj out and bring in a much higher light in terms of using the essence of nature and spirituality and the physical form. But we're talking about 3 different elements of trying to compact that into one idea. So it's a very based ideology. You have to divert it between cosmology and also about, the physical realm of and ethics of light and darkness. So it's a little different. So there needs to be a separation of it.
There was another question right next to the gentleman, correct? Do you have a question? Okay. Anyone else? We have a little time. Okay.
Sure.
Let's.
I can hear
Okay.
you.
I watched the documentary yesterday about this, and they're saying that it's sort of ending because you can't add people into it.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Great question. Great question. I would beg to differ. And the reason I beg to differ is because, and let me explain why this thinking is there. When we migrated from Iran to India, the idea, when we were received by the king, Jadarana, who was a Hindu king, he imposed some rules on the Zoroastrians when they landed. He said, you're here, because there was so much migration coming to India that, they were trying to put holds on that from happening. So they had very specific rules about caste. They didn't want to have people start mixing into their caste system. So a few rules he imposed. He said to the priests, he said, you must wear our local clothes, which is the sari. So we did. You must speak our language, which is Gujarati, which was on the western side of India. So we adopted it. So now Parsis speak the same language. So my husband, who's sitting here, when I told my parents, he speaks Gujarati. Oh, great, it doesn't matter what religion he is. And then the other thing was you couldn't be married after sundown. You had to be married after sundown. And the other was to remain in your caste system. And the priest said, we can do this. As long as, you give us those, what will you give us, bring us back to our society here in India? And the priest took a bowl, he said, may I have a bowl of milk? And he added sugar to it. And he stirred it into the milk. And he said, we will be invisible. Do you see the sugar? We will be invisible. But we will sweeten your world. And so after that, Parsis were always known as the sweet people because they always wanted to never to take away from what it currently always existed. They always wanted to just do their own thing and be part and raise their own, children in their own religion and practice freely. And so what has taken place is this ideology of you can only be married to someone who is of the Zoroastrian faith and to stay within your caste. So this idea of staying within the caste really comes from an idea that was imposed upon us generations ago. And it still remains because it's conditioning, right? But if you look at Zoroaster's message in his Gathas, it's open, it's universal. Anyone can join. And so when the Kurds are saying, we want to go back, come, It's okay, as long as you practice. It is a very different delineation between ethnicity, which is very important to the Parsis in India. It's very, very key, because they relate it to their identity. And their identity is very specific. But that doesn't mean it has to be reflected in other parts of the world. And it's a very controversial issue, actually, right now.
What was the name of the gentleman who did the milk and the...
He was, well, the King Jadarana was the king that received them. But I don't know the priest's name, actually. Yeah.
But that priest was absolutely right, because you've certainly sweetened our experience today.
Thank you so much.
And we really do need to thank you for coming
My
and
pleasure.
sharing this magnificent tradition with us. Can we all
Thank you for having me.
And thank you to the magnificent spiritual artists who were here with us today.
And thank you all.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for joining us
Indeed.
today.
And sweet sister, thank you, Arda.
Thank you.